Hi, this is Brennan Davis from Bedrock Games and the Bedrock blog, and I'm here with Adam Balderstone for another episode of Bedrock and Balderstone, and we are talking about I Claudius, Episode 7, Reign of Terror. We're slowly working our way through I Claudius. Normally we would do 2 episodes a week. I think we've been doing 1 a week the past couple of weeks, so we apologize for that, but I think that we're refreshed and we feel good about where the show is at this point. So Episode 7, Reign of Terror, is a point in the series where Tiberius has basically retired to Capri. He's really doubled down on his resentment towards Agrippina and her son, so he is banishing Agrippina and arresting Nero, and he eventually tries to have her son Drusus arrested. And this, is also a period where Sejanus is being given control of Rome, and just really, the title says it all. But he's basically really, he's got Rome, in his grip really tight, and so, the episode ends with Sejanus and La Villa trying to, really at La Villa's urging, hatching a plot to assassinate Tiberius, which is uncovered by Antonia, who slips a message through Claudius in his history of Carthage, and Tiberius is able to have Sejanus arrested and executed. He bathes Rome in blood, and he decides to make Caligula, of all people, his successor. And so I'm glossing over a lot. This is a very eventful episode. I think it's another focused episode, though. It's kind of got a real focus, I would say.
Oh, very much so. Yes.
And,
yes.
So what did you think of the episode, Adam?
It's a fantastic episode. I think what's interesting is, we had kind of the Livia stage of the show where she was doing her machinations, and they were all very much within her family. It was like lots of horrible things happened, but it was all like her, poisoning various people within the royal family. It's like with this, we kind of see things spill out all throughout Rome. It's like, all these horrible things are happening to people throughout the entire city, and no one's safe, and anyone can just be grabbed and accused and murdered at any time. It's like Sejanus just has this much wider range, and he's a lot less discriminate too. Livia was very cunning and picky in who she would go after, and it's like, Sejanus is just going after anybody that has even the slightest reason to go after. He's going to go after and grab them.
I would push back a little bit on that, because I was thinking about that this morning, and I was thinking about how over the course of the show, it's really kind of about how horrible the reigns become over time, and the kind of terror that you're living under. And under the Sejanus reign, it's actually not that bad. It's bad. It's bad, especially if you haven't figured out what's going on. But for those who have figured out what's going on, it's fairly navigable. It's just that you have to say the right things. You have to, as long as you don't give Sejanus a reason to kill you. He's not like a vindictive person. Do you know what I mean? He's actually quite emotionless. There's that moment where where is it? There's this senator who when he asks for the Senate to sign off on having Drusus arrested. There's a senator, Asinius Gallus, who refuses, who's a friend of Claudius, and he gives this big speech. And he basically calls it's kind of like that speech in The Princess Bride, where the woman calls her the Queen of Refuse. It's that kind of rebuke. He just says, like, you're not. He basically says, you're not even in charge of all this. You're just the stench that from the decay of the institution in the city. And Sejanus is totally unfazed by it. He's just like, okay, we'll start again. They beat the guy up. He passes out. Okay, we'll start again in a moment. And so Sejanus, I don't think, is a vindictive person. I think he just goes after the people that aren't playing ball, and he sees as a threat, and that haven't caught on that he's sort of in charge of everything now, and that this is no longer a republic, that this is a new system of government, and so again, it's horrible, but it's highly navigable. But then when we get to the Caligula,
I don't know if it is though. I mean, but you're bringing up the Caligula thing. The Caligula thing, there's an increasing level, but I feel like, the difference is, you're right. There will be an escalation. Things will get worse than this. But, during the Livia stage of the show, Augustus was ruling, and he seemed to be largely a fair-minded person for the most part.
Yeah, I think we can agree on that.
And so it's like, for the average person in the Senate or the average person in Rome, it was like things were much easier to navigate. Whereas with Sejanus, it's like you couldn't be sure. You could just make an off comment. You could just make an off comment about the emperor at a dinner party, and Sejanus would have a spy there reporting, and you'd be there because like I said, the first thing we see, it's like they're really petty things that people are getting nailed for.
but the thing is, the reason he's going to do that to you is because he needs to get rid of you for some reason, unless you can be useful to him. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but a lot of people can't be useful to him. I mean,
well, but again, I think it's bad. I'm not saying it's a good situation to live under. I'm just saying I feel like with Sejanus, I would be able to at least have a shot at figuring out how to survive that. And with Livia, I feel like I'd almost have less of a shot because you never quite know what her aim is. And so
no, well, my point exactly. I mean, that's a good point. My point though is that her aim was much less selective. It's like I think we saw the majority of people. I mean, there probably were off-stage people that she took care of at times, but we saw the majority of the people she killed. Whereas Sejanus, we didn't. We just saw the tiniest fraction of the people that he had murdered.
Yeah, and again, and just to be clear, we're talking about the show Sejanus. We're not necessarily talking about the historical figure Sejanus here.
Yeah, and as always on the show, I am viewing this as a show. I am not going to comment on historical accuracy because that just kind of it gets into gray waters.
But based on what the show presents to us, I think it's an interesting discussion. It's funny because we always have these interesting sort of discussions about each character. With Livia, it was more about what is, how redeeming a view of her can we take, and here with Sejanus, I feel like, I don't know, knowing what's coming over the course of the show, I feel a certain amount of comfort during the Sejanus years, where I feel like I could probably figure out a way to survive that. But then once you get to the Caligula reign, it's like, how do you even attempt to survive?
Yeah.
And then it gets even more tricky.
I agree with that part.
And then it gets like even more tricky during Claudius's reign because it's deceptively calm, but there's all this turmoil caused by Messalina and all these other things. And so I feel like with Sejanus is such a simple person. He just wants to rise to the top. That's like all he cares about is becoming emperor. You know what I mean? Like that's it. And if you can help him meet that goal, you're fine. Caligula is a much more complicated person than that. Claudius is a much more complicated person than that. But Sejanus is sort of like the working man's tyrant. Do you know what I mean? Like you can.
Yeah, he is. I will give you that.
Yeah.
I will give you that. He is a simple person to figure out. That is very true.
Well, and I like the sort of class thing that's going on in this episode because Sejanus, again, really all Sejanus wants is to get Tiberius's position. In order to get it, he needs to rise through the ranks because I think he's only an equestrian, which really isn't that low. And I'm not 100% sure on his actual rank at the moment, but I'm pretty sure he's being presented as an equestrian here, and so in order to get to the senatorial order, he needs to make a move of some kind. And so the move that he's making is he's trying to marry La Villa, and the emperor says, "I can't do that. So how about we arrange a marriage between you and the daughter Helen?" And I just like sort of the I like the way the show is handling the social order. It's not beating you over the head with it. It's not laying out all of the ground rules, but you know that they're understood, and it presents them.
I was a little perplexed by that though. I have to admit I don't, because it's like, okay, Villa's off the table because she's too high rank. How is her daughter not too high rank?
Oh,
Like, how does that work?
because La Villa was married to a senator, is I think what his argument was, and she's not the kind of woman that anybody would expect to be
it wasn't
content.
just her lineage; it was also her status she'd achieved in life.
I think it was her lineage, the status she had achieved in life, and her personality, and that that he understood her. So
okay, that makes sense. Him being having been married to a senator does change things.
And basically Tiberius was saying, I'd have to have you enrolled as to the senatorial rank.
I get it. I get
so,
it. Yeah,
I believe
one thing that kind of that makes total sense. That fits with everything we were told. I was just focusing on it being because of her family, and I was like, but yeah, I understand that.
But anyway, so I like sort of the, I don't know, he's very, like I said, he's very easy for me to understand as a person. I feel like as much as I would be horrified of him, and as much as I would not want to live in these conditions, I think I could survive it. I wouldn't be able, like, it's sort of like, again, maybe I'm bringing my own class things to the table, but I feel like surviving Caligula is like surviving the elitist cocktail parties of cocktail parties. Do you know what I mean? And surviving Sejanus is like, going to a family dinner and surviving. It's so much easier to get through the reign of Sejanus than Caligula.
I mean, the thing is, it's easy to say that, but it's also going to be the fact that he's going to pick off so many people around you that mean something to you at the same time. So it's like, you can't just keep your head down, but keeping your head down when people that are important to you are being picked off right and left and tortured and murdered is harder. It's harder to keep your mouth shut and keep your head down and not give any sign that you're unhappy about it.
No, I agree with you. And again, I'm not commenting on the morality of it. It's awful. What I'm saying is, by the time we get to Caligula, everybody realizes that they have to play ball by the time of Caligula. Do you know what I mean? Like, at this point, people still don't realize it. Like, the whole thing with Asinius Gallus is that, he still thinks that the Republic has a shot. Do you know what I mean? He's still talking as if the Republic is a viable institution. And so, but everybody who survives has just realized you have to play along. You have to keep your head down. And by the time of Caligula, everybody is pretty much like, there's nobody that's really actively resisting
they're all dead already.
Yeah, they've all died. And so, but at that point, it's just a matter of people don't know what they need to do to survive. So, but if you roll it back to Sejanus, it's just interesting to me that the show is able to paint the reign of Sejanus as this greener pasture than the reign of Caligula, and we're seeing all the signs of that over the course of this episode. Caligula has a lot of crucial moments here. We're kind of bouncing around, but
there's some great Caligula moments. Yeah, the conversation with him and Tiberius at the end. What a sad statement on our times.
Yeah,
that's just one of the lines that always stuck with me on this show. His delivery of that line just kills me every time.
Let's talk about that up until the end, and then we'll go back and talk about some of the earlier things in the episode, I think. But basically, not Tiberius. Claudius is writing a history of Carthage, and there's a whole scene about elephants on the when he's having them copied that we need to talk about later. But his mother finds out about the plot to kill Tiberius, and she realizes that she can put a note inside his history of Carthage and have him ask Tiberius for permission to dedicate the book to him, and tell him to read this one particular scroll first, because they know he's not going to read something unless it's like pornography. So they've got to basically hand it to him. And because of Claudius's marriage to Sejanus' sister, and because Sejanus has absolutely no respect for Claudius, she's convinced that this will work. And so the next scene is him at Capri with Tiberius just having read the note, and Caligula is there because Caligula has now been taken under his wing because he's sort of living the lifestyle that Tiberius lives. That's sort of how he's surviving.
Yeah.
And so we see Tiberius come out, and he tells them, about La Villa's plot, and Caligula, the first things out of his lips are, "I always knew that woman was no good," and it's said with such sincerity, and you know that he doesn't make those kinds of moral judgments, at least up until this point.
Yeah,
then,
that's the thing. He says it. He says it with this overhyped kind of sincerity, with just the underlying smarminess underneath it at the same time. It's just a fantastic performance.
But what I think is interesting is when he becomes fully convinced of his own godhood, that becomes a sincere sentiment in his character. But then the next thing he says, after they talk about what they were planning, is people really are despicable, and he says something to the effect of, it's such a sad commentary on our time. He's just making all these he's peppering the conversation with these observations, and it's just so perfect. But ultimately, the way that he secures his own reign, the way that he sort of he does all that, and then he uses this situation to position himself as the inheritor of Tiberius's position. And it's done because they can't figure out how to get rid of Sejanus, because Sejanus's men are all loyal. He's got the city in an iron grip. Like, who do you go to? There's nobody that they can go to. And so Caligula says, on the other hand, if you can't find a man with integrity, look for a man with ambition. Find a dog who will eat a dog. And he has this Sejanus's number 2, who we've just seen, I think, dealing with Asinius. And so we sort of know who he is. And by the way, he's the guy, I forget his name, but he played the dwarf in Lord of the Rings, and he also was in the miniseries Shogun. He played an important role in that as well. He's a face that you recognize. But Caligula's been sleeping with this guy's wife with the guy's knowledge, because the guy is ambitious. And initially, Tiberius is really upset. He's like, well, you're sleeping with the guy's wife and you think he's going to help us? He's like, no, you don't understand. He's ambitious. And then light dawns on Tiberius's face, and he's like, oh, I'm going to make you my heir. I shall make you my... Oh, no, I got the whole quote here. He says, I shall make you my successor, Gaius Caligula. You shall stay with me here. Rome deserves you. I will nurse you like a viper in her bosom. And it's just...
I loved the fact that, the show could have gone, in the book could have gone one way, where it's like, Caligula's ingratiation tricks Tiberius into making him his successor. But it's like, no, Tiberius knows exactly what Caligula is. And it's just this final act of spite. It's like, here you go, Rome. This is my parting gift to you.
Because in an earlier episode, Livia had said, he wants to be loved. And so he's going to select somebody who's 10 times worse than him to be the successor. And then he sort of puts his arms around Caligula and says, tonight we'll draw up a list during dinner, a long list. The city will be purged as surely as she had gorged herself on figs for a year. Blah, 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 blah. The streets will run like a sewer. And it just paints this magnificent image. And then, normally what happens in this show is you don't see the image that gets painted. They paint an image, and the image is powerful enough that you're able to imagine it, and you think it was part of the show. But here they actually show you the aftermath, and they show you they show Sejanus being arrested. They show, Claudius, listening to the screams throughout Rome as his wife Aelia is begging him for help, and he's scrambling away from her and weeping. And then we see Sejanus dragged down the steps of the Senate, dead. There's a lot that happens in the wake of this scene, but one of the things that's pretty striking is Sejanus's children are killed, and they're killed in a pretty horrifying way, and
very horrifying.
It's one of the most horrifying parts of the show, and it's even done. The thing that's interesting about it, though, is the only redeeming trait that I can really find with Sejanus is he seems to have sincere love of his children. We get one little scene where he goes to his kids, and he looks like a normal dad. Like if this were not I Claudius, this would be like the dad coming home from work scene where he's just greeting his kids, and even when he's disciplining them, it's sort of discipline done in, like, you can tell that these are well disciplined kids who respect their father, kind of a thing. You know, and so I don't know. I feel like it makes it that much more awful that, you know, that the kids are the one thing about Sejanus that you kind of like, and that they're just executed. And there's this horrifying moment where one of the soldiers is reluctant to kill them, and Macro, who's in charge of, you know, this reign of terror that Tiberius is unleashing, you know, says, well, you know, you have to do it. And the guy says, well, but the girl's a virgin. It's unprecedented. She'll, you know, the city will be cursed. And so Macro says, well, make sure she's not a virgin when you're done. And they don't, you know, they don't get into it more than that, I believe. But I mean, it's an awful, you know, it's really unimaginable. And
yeah, well, Aelia comments on it when she comes to Claudius begging for help in the subsequent scene where she talks about what happened to the children and in a little more detail. But it's rough. I mean, the ending of this episode is pretty horrifying with because it's like you want, you know, it's like Sejanus is a villain, and you want Sejanus to get what's coming to him, but everything just spirals so heavily out of control at the end that there's not a lot of satisfaction in this happening.
Well, you know what it is? It's called Reign of Terror, and when you watch the episode, you'd think they're talking about Sejanus' Reign of Terror, but what they think they're really talking about is the bloodshed at the end. And
it's both, I think. But yeah, it's it really comes along at the end, though.
Well, you know, it makes it like it's I don't know. It's sort of like apples and oranges, though. Like the what we see at the end, like, and again, like you said, there's obviously lots of people that Sejanus has dispatched that we don't see, but all we can really work with is what the show presents to us. And the show, again, I think the show does this excellent job of making every preceding sort of evil seem like a picnic compared to what you're presently going through. And so it's kind of like a gut punch, like because the whole episode you're sort of like, I really hope they get rid of this Sejanus guy, like, you know, and you're almost cheering, like by the point when they arrest him, you're sort of like, yeah, they're getting Sejanus, and then you're like, oh no, it's just going in directions I wasn't expecting, and then it's like you said, it's just not satisfying because you're not able to sort of get the win that you wanted to. You're sort of hoping to see Sejanus punished, like, you know, arrested and executed. That's what you're hoping for, and it just opens up it's like Tiberius says, it runs like a sewer. It's just an awful mess when they actually do arrest him and remove him, and then I guess the sad truth to it is, it's like, with the exception of the children, obviously, but like a lot of the executions that are taking place that night are probably necessary if they don't want to have, you know, just a series of back and forth violence that spirals into civil war.
Well, but here's the question. You know, I mean, you're talking. You know, to go back to our little argument before about, you know, whether it would be easy to live under Sejanus. This shows you why it's not easy, because, okay, you keep your head down and you're the person that goes, sure, Sejanus, I'm on your side. And then when Sejanus does get taken down, you're on the list. It's like,
oh yeah, no, absolutely.
It's like, you know, deciding you're going to line up with a tyrant means if that tyrant loses his grip, you're dead.
I 100% agree with you. I think it's definitely a strong point against my argument, because, and I was actually thinking about it during the show, because that scene when they announce his, when they read Tiberius's letter in the Senate, where Tiberius says, you know, oh, what is worse than a trust betrayed? And he's talking about Sejanus, and they're about to arrest him. You see all of Sejanus's supporters in the Senate slink away. And I think we even might see some of their faces in the pile of bodies at the end. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I feel like some of those guys, you know, definitely didn't survive. And so I think, yeah, it's a calculation. But here's the thing: I feel like at least under Sejanus, I am able to make the calculation. How long is Sejanus going to reign for? How long am I going to survive if I put my weight behind Sejanus versus this other person? It's still a very practical calculation. By the time you get to Caligula, it's not even, you can't even calculate it. Is the it just becomes this question mark that's unanswerable.
No, but it's
and I do want to emphasize here, I'm saying that the reign of Sejanus would have been easy in relation to the reign of Caligula, which is so terrible that it's gone down in history as this one of the things to watch out for, in the course of history.
Sure. I know. I get your point. It's like, it's something we can talk more about when we get into future episodes, is how bad things. Wow, those Sejanus episodes look pretty good right now. But yeah, it shows good at showing you how many different flavors of terrible government you can have.
Well, and I think to bring it to like a possible gaming context, it shows you flavors of evil. Do you know what I mean? Like Sejanus is a very different flavor of evil than Caligula, and they're both a very different flavor than Livia, and all of them are an entirely different flavor of evil than Messalina or any of these other characters that creep up that are the villain of the the villain of the month. And so it's one of the things I like about the show, and I just feel like I like Sejanus's evil because I can understand it. I can understand his evil fully.
It's very rational evil. Yeah, he is the most rational of the evil emperor. Well, not just the evil tyrants in the background too, including Livia, because she's not really an emperor. But because like you say, with Livia, she is. Livia is acting by logic, but it's a veiled logic in a way that Sejanus isn't. But
but also he's operating more at a level that we would be operating at. Like I feel like the other villains are all largely aristocrats, with the exception of Messalina. I think she starts out as a performer, but most of the other villains are aristocrats, and they're operating on a level that we might not quite. Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes there's a gulf between my understanding of the world and Livia's understanding of the world. Do you know what I mean? We have two. I can't quite put my head into.
We spent so much time arguing about Livia, and I don't know if you could ever really come down. I'm not even entirely sure of my own conclusions because there's just. Yeah, she's just a fascinating enigma in a lot of ways.
But Sejanus comes from a world that I at least understand. He is
the most comprehensible of the three.
So much so that when Asinius, let's talk about the Asinius speech, because that's pretty important. He's forced to confess, and he's basically, I think he's charged with sowing enmity between Tiberius, the emperor, and the captain of his guard, Sejanus. Some kind of charge like that. But basically he's being charged because he wouldn't sign off on the Drusus arrest. He gives this big speech, and I don't know that I have all of it, but the bulk of it is this. He says, you are not really the destroyer, you are merely the putrefaction that spreads after death, the outward visible sign of its presence. You are a lesson in history to me, Sejanus, proving to me that above all mankind needs its sense of smell. And when he says smell, his face is all bloody, and he leans into the word. And Sejanus is totally unfazed. But before that, he says to Sejanus, "You're just like a small town, police captain, basically, and that's all you'll ever be." And the moment he says that, I kind of lose whatever empathy and sympathy for Asinius they had been cultivating with me. That's the moment that it dips for me in the conversation.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, why is that?
I don't know. I feel like he's looking down at all of the equestrians when he says that. Do you know what I mean?
Huh.
And the equestrians aren't even that low in the social order. They're still pretty high up.
I don't know. I interpreted it differently. I get where you're coming from, and you might be right. But my interpretation of that was just from the standpoint that it's that let's see how to put this in words. I mean, it's a typical small town cop thing who's just abusing his power. He's just saying, that his ambitions are so petty. It's not like he's criticizing his place in the world or his birthright or anything. It's more of a, man, like at least Augustus to an extent had higher, ambitions. It's like you could accuse him of suppressing the Republic and everything, but it's just Sejanus is just this guy who just wants his power and he just wants to punish the people that are on his side, and that's it. There's like nothing there beyond it. I think that's what he was getting at.
I think you're right. I mean, I think that's what he's saying. I think that's the point of what he's saying. I just can't help but notice that gap. What I'm, you got that. That is interesting. You're adding an interesting layer to it for me, definitely. And again, it's hard to. I don't know the best comparison, and I'm not like a historian or anything, so like take what I say with a grain of salt. But like the equestrian order is not that much lower than the senatorial order, and it's it's almost like, I guess the closest comparison would be like if you were like upper middle class, and you were trying to move in circles that were rich or in the 1%. Do you know what I mean? Or like your family, like I don't know what the cutoff point is, but like your family makes like $1 million a year, say, so you're like wealthy, but you're trying to move in circles of people who make billions of dollars a year. That's a pretty wide gap there. Yeah. It's a wide gap, but it's still not like, to somebody like us, it's like, you know what I mean? It's like what's the difference between $1 million and $1 billion to us? Do you know what I mean? Like
I don't know. I think the gap between us and people that have $1 million is a lot smaller than the gap between the people that have $1 million and the people that have $1 billion. It's kind of
okay. I don't know. I think once you're in that million category, like all of your basic needs are met. Do you know what I mean? And that's and so
well, I mean, they are and they aren't. I mean, a million's a lot, okay. But it's not. You're not bulletproof.
Okay, my numbers might be badly chosen because I grew up in the '80s and like $1 million back then meant more.
$1 million is like a bad year on the stock market will destroy you if you.
But here's the thing. $1 million in a year is more money than I could imagine. More money than most people can imagine making.
Making $1 million in a year, you're saying?
Yeah, okay. That's what I was saying.
That's still that is quite a bit.
I mean, $1 million a year, you're never gonna go hungry on $1 million a year. You're gonna always live in a mansion, basically, if you make $1 million a year, right? Like, unless you're spending gargantuan sums.
Well, a lot of people do, though. I mean, that's the thing. It's like if you're in the people that are in the $1 million a year club often have their sights on the $1 billion a year club, which means they have to, they often are just living.
But that's what I'm saying. I'm saying, to me, that's what this looks like. That looks like Sejanus is in the $1 million a year club trying to get into the $1 billion.
I agree with your analogy. Yeah. I don't know. I don't even remember where we're disagreeing here. We're sort of on a detour, but it's okay. But the basic point is, it's not that like. It's really not that big of a difference between them to anybody else in the world. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It's a difference that matters to these two guys. It's not a difference that would matter to us if we were plebs in Rome. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Which is probably what we would be. We'd probably be slaves. Like, we probably wouldn't even be plebs. Yeah. So it's just, I don't know. It's interesting to me because the class thing did come up more than once in this episode. Yeah.
And it's I said a moment ago that there was only one thing that I liked about Sejanus, which was his parenting skills. But aside from that, maybe also the fact that he's still like a millionaire, but he's the closest thing we have to like a working man in the.
Well, you make an interesting point about the parenting skills thing from the standpoint that if he is it's kind of been shown in the show. You've talked about how spoiled all the people that we've seen that are are part of the ruling class, and yeah, so it does make an interesting contrast that he does have these two. We see nothing bad about his kids at all.
Yeah.
They seem very polite, well-behaved people in a way that you know that people that are plebs have to be a little more polite.
Yeah, because all we know based on his interaction with his kids that he's affectionate but also capable of disciplining, and so it just seems like a very sort of, I don't know, just kind of normal parenting to me when I see him. Whereas the other folk who are all largely from the senatorial class, it's all kind of it's very there's this sense of distance between the kids and the parents, but also this sense that most of them have been either spoiled or they've been groomed for something very specific. It's just a much different set of priorities, I guess, is what you see at work. But I did want to talk about the Carthage history that Claudius is writing, because he goes to the copier. There's they have a whole system in Rome to produce large numbers of documents, and they basically have scribes copying the text that Claudius needs. He's writing a history of Carthage, and it's being put into like a scroll box, and it's multiple scrolls. And the place that's doing it, the chief there, I don't know what his official title is. The guy that they chose was great. This is one of my favorite characters in the show.
Definitely, it's a great scene.
Essentially, what's going on is he is trying to put elephant pictures into the text to liven it up, and Claudius is taking his history very serious, and he doesn't want elephants of any kind in the text, and so the guy is like, but it's fashionable, and Claudius is like, but it's a damn silly motif, it just doesn't work, and so the guy's like, okay, no more elephants are out. Our esteemed client disapproves of elephants, even your elephant, sir, which I must say are exquisitely drawn. And so he just goes on this. It's just this very passive aggressive way of handling Claudius. I really like that scene. It's important because this is sort of the vessel through which the message gets to Tiberius. But otherwise, it's kind of a disposable scene. But it always sticks with me.
Well, it's just one of those scenes like the scene with the actor in the first episode, I think it was, where you just kind of get this little sense of Roman life kind of going around. It's just this, because it's easy when the characters are all, in the palace for it to be disconnected. But it's sort of those moments where it's like they're dealing with, Claudius is just dealing with these people who are. This is his publisher.
Yeah.
He just adds a little texture to the world.
Well, and the thing is, it's also, we get a lot of sort of Claudius as historian in this episode, because when he speaks with he's with Asinius when he gets arrested, and that he meets Asinius in the place that he's having the copies made, and Asinius says, "Oh, did you read my essay on Cicero and Pollio?" And basically, it sounds like Asinius was criticizing Cicero, saying that his speeches weren't that great, and which is interesting in its own. I remember having to read Cicero's speeches in history class, and but Claudius.
What was your opinion, great or not?
I don't really have a strong opinion actually on Cicero, but number one, I was reading translations, and so whenever you're reading translations, I don't think you quite I probably can't appreciate Cicero as well as someone who read it in Latin. Yeah. But the thing that was interesting to me is he asked Claudius what he thinks, and Claudius' response is, "Oh, I don't know if I agree." And then they very politely sort of have this discussion. Obviously Asinius probably has much bigger things on his mind, so maybe that's part of why he's not worked up about Claudius disagreeing with him. But I just found it to be a very sort of scholarly exchange that the two men are having.
Go ahead.
Oh no, and I just thought it was an interesting topic. Like, well, how good of an orator was Cicero? It was again just a nice sort of little. It's something that it's in a lot of this is being invented. Like we don't know a lot of a lot of the text that they're, like enough stuff has been lost that they're able to sort of fill in blanks and create this world where we don't know, how Claudius's life as a scholar might really have been, but this is kind of nice. Do you know what I mean? This is like a nice thing. So, I really enjoy that part of the show.
I mean, just talking about Claudius, it's obviously you get a scholarly side, but it's also, the end of the episode, it's just, it was commented, I think, in the previous episode about, Herod, when he talks about Claudius, we kind of see that again, where at the end of the episode when his wife comes begging, and it's like Claudius is just horrified, running away from her, and it's like he isn't taking any kind of stand anywhere on anything at the end of this episode, even though he was the messenger that brought all this about. That was more him being pushed into it by his mother than anything he really did on his own.
The whole exchange with his mother was hysterical, I think.
Yes, it was.
Because, she's just, he doesn't want to give it to him because of the elephants, and she's like, you're just like the biggest fool that any mother could have been burdened with, and all that. It's a very, like, Antonia. What's interesting to me about Antonia in this episode is, number one, she doesn't really know all of the stuff that's going on with Livia. She just learns about it at the beginning of the episode, and she only gets a taste of it, and then by the end of the episode, let's talk first about La Villa, and then we'll talk about where this goes, because I think we have to do it in order. But La Villa is plotting with Sejanus to have Tiberius killed, and the reason why is because she's outraged that Tiberius has not agreed to allow them to marry, and instead offered up the option of him marrying Helen, who's La Villa's daughter. And so La Villa's response to this is to start poisoning Helen, and basically doing it, I think, to put pressure on Sejanus to make a move against Tiberius. And so what sort of happens in the show is we realize Sejanus is being forced to act early, and that's probably why things unfold the way they do, because of his relationship with La Villa. And Antonia discovers all this, and after she informs Tiberius of the plot, she locks La Villa in a room herself and starves her to death. And this harkens back to the wolf scene much earlier in the show, where she says, I hope I should be dead by then, and then she says, shut your mouth, or you'll have no dinner this evening, or something. And it all just plays. I mean, that was again foreshadowing. It's not something that I usually care about, but just the way it's done in this show is just so well placed and well crafted that by the time you get to this scene, you're like, oh. And also she's just sitting there on a chair in front of the door, we've seen this scene before with Augustus and Julia. Do you know what I mean? I think it was reversed. I think Julia was on the outside of the door and Augustus was inside.
Inside, yes.
But it's the same scene. And Antonia, is sort of an echo of Augustus's resolve, but even more so because Augustus had to put a shroud over his head and block out his ears, and she's absorbing.
Yes, it's her, as she said, it's her punishment to listen to it. It's like she's going to listen to every single scream, whereas Augustus, he was not willing to.
So, again, I mean, it's a horrible thing, but there's so many horrible things in the show, and you come away from this just really respecting Antonia by the end of the series. Again, she's she just it's a kind, I don't know, it's sort of a kind of honor that doesn't really exist anymore. Do you know what I mean? Maybe never quite existed, but she's just a very interesting character to me.
She very much believes in the Roman honor, which may or may not have ever been real. Yeah. But it's
even in the show, it's presented as probably, she's kind of buying into a lie, but she buys into it so thoroughly that you just can't help but respect her determination. And again, it's the character that spills over to her son Claudius. But though I would say,
though, Claudius is interesting too, because I like I said, we see at the end with Claudius's reaction to everything, and with this show, the show's angle, of course, is that Claudius, this character, regarded as a fool and so on, and but we see there's greater depth to him. But the show never goes overboard and going, hey, everyone thinks Claudius is a fool, but he's really a great guy. It's like they keep him very human. It's like there's moments. You overall you like the character, but there's lots of moments where you really don't respect what he does either. It's very complicated.
What would be some examples, if you can think of any?
Of not respecting him?
Yeah, this episode. Was there anything in particular that you were thinking, or?
Just his reaction to his wife showing up. It's like he's not willing to help her, and he's not willing to really rebuff her either. He's just shutting the whole thing out and running away. Yeah. It's like if he was like, there's no stand. He's just bending, trying to bend with the wind, and as Herod puts it, and he's not willing to do anything.
And he's on the floor. He's like screaming on the floor. There's not a lot of dignity in that scene. If that were Antonia, she would have rebuked her. She would have been like,
exactly.
Well, you're getting what you deserve. You shouldn't have been his sister. You shouldn't have been loyal to him or whatever.
You shouldn't have been born his sister. Yeah. That's what she got.
She would have said something much better than that. That's something my grandfather would have said. But she would say something like that. Like, so that kind of... She would have been...
Well, she was very much on board with what was happening. Yeah. I mean, because it's not like she just did happen to randomly be a sister. She knew what was going on.
But Claudius is this weird mixture of his mother with maybe his father, something else.
There's definitely some of his
maybe
father.
A bit of Augustus, because there's this degree of compassion in him, which is admirable, but also would have caused him to make all the wrong moves this episode if his mother hadn't sort of directed him in the right course. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, like, he wouldn't have wanted his sister to die. Do you know what I mean? He would have protected his sister. And so,
yeah.
And so,
and it would have been, me saying the show, I like the way the show is willing to have him be weak. It would have been really easy to write the exact same episode and have Claudius be like, hey, I'm going to smuggle this letter in my history, and I'm going to take it and show it to Tiberius and make Claudius the hero of this episode. That would be the easy narrative choice to make. It'd be like, and you can have everything else play out the same, but the show doesn't do that. It's not going out of its way to make Claudius a hero or anything.
Now, what do you think about the Asinius scene? Because I feel like this show does do a good job of that. It doesn't generally make you feel like the writer is putting himself in as the I think that's kind of what you're talking about when the writer sort of says, now is the heroic moment where I get, it's kind of more about the writer getting to shine than anything else. And I feel like the only scene in the series that gets close to that is the Asinius scene. And I was just curious on your, do you think that was too heavy-handed? Or because he really rebukes Sejanus in a big way. It's a really big, sort of very descriptive speech of what he thinks Sejanus is. And I mean, Sejanus is about to have him tortured and killed, and he's just sort of standing there in total defiance. But again, I mean, there's more details to the scene, obviously.
I mean, I get what you're saying. It could be seen that way, but I think it kind of works to have a character who is willing to do that, just to contrast with Claudius, who is not quite willing to go, not to go out there. I think it serves a narrative purpose aside from the author saying, "Here's what I think of Sejanus," because I don't get the feeling the writer isn't someone who's just putting up Sejanus to be purely hated. The writer's also the person showing, hey, he's a good father. I feel like I don't feel like this is that kind of a show where I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but that's my take.
No. It's just I just think it's an interesting scene because number one, the actor. I mean, he's like, I don't know the terminology, but he's doing all the things actors do when they're sort of giving a big, meaningful speech. He's like rolling all of his R's. He's like he's
sure.
enunciating in a particular way, and he really seems to be like the the thing he does at the end where he says, mankind needs a sense of smell, and it's like the way he delivers that line, he didn't have to deliver it that way. He chose to deliver it that way.
Sure.
And the director may have asked him to deliver it that way. And so
that's also possible.
So I'm very curious about the scene because it struck me as heavy-handed, but at the same time, like you're saying, it contrasts with Claudius. And also by the end of the scene, it's deflated by the fact that Sejanus says, "Oh, okay, we'll just start over again." You know what I mean?
Exactly. It because that's the thing. If you were gonna do, if you were writing that scene to make it the heavy-handed, I'm gonna have this character really show Sejanus what's what. Sejanus would react, but the fact that Sejanus, it just bounces off him. He really, really doesn't care what this guy thinks about him in the least.
Yeah.
That stops it from playing as as being, ooh, here's the scene where Sejanus, gets told the truth. It's and Sejanus listens to, the thing is, knowing yet what we know about Sejanus is sitting there reading his spies reports about people saying terrible things about him day in and day out, I'm sure. Yep. If anyone is inured to criticism of himself, it's Sejanus.
Yeah, I would say so. Now, did we talk about the scene where Claudius bumps into Caligula in the street?
No, we have not talked about that. That's where he...
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's the one where he tells him he's going to Capri, right? Caligula does.
Yes, I believe that is that scene. It's the one where Claudius goes to tell him that he is that he thinks Caligula's in danger because Drusus has just been arrested, and Caligula
yes.
and Caligula number one, he's eating peaches the whole scene. And he's eating them in a particular way. He just doesn't look like he cares. Like Claudius comes to him and he has this look of desperation. He's like, "You're in danger." And Caligula's just kind of like, eating a peach and like wiping his hand on his robe and, just kind of casually tossing pits to the ground. It's just that he just doesn't seem that concerned. But he slips in and out of it because at a certain point in the scene, he says, I think Claudius says to him, like, "Don't you even care that your brother has been arrested?" And he says, "Yes, it matters very much to me." And he suddenly gets very serious. And you can see that Caligula is also kind of playing a game. Do you know what I mean? Like Claudius has been playing the fool to survive up into this point. And I think you get a hint that Caligula's also been making his own maneuvers. And he is much more aware of what's going on than his demeanor would otherwise suggest.
That's an interesting interesting take on the scene. I mean, considering we've talked before about how these two characters do have a certain connection, that is an interesting take that Caligula to an extent plays up his craziness, and is like Claudius plays up being the stammering fool.
Well, because I think Caligula, I mean, we'll talk about it as we get more into it in the show. But number one, he's got a number of personalities that rise to the surface. He's kind of split between the impish and the serious Caligula, like the serious and sincere, and the impish and whimsical sort of, and also his madness is sort of, sometimes he sort of is hamming it up deliberately, and sometimes it's real madness. And so here I feel like we were seeing the hammed up, "Ooh, I'm such a perv, aren't I?" And he's sort of doing it to get a reaction. Like I guess we'd call him an edgelord in today's language. Like he's just kind of doing it to get
Caligula, the ultimate edgelord.
He's just trying to get a reaction. But there's a purpose to it. Do you know what I mean? There's an aim, and the aim is he's trying to survive because all of his brothers and his mother are being arrested and exiled and executed, and number two, there's a path to becoming emperor clearly laid out before him. And so I'm sort of wondering, number one, I mean, we know that Caligula's a perverted guy. He ends the scene talking about, "I love my sisters" to Claudius, and he means something very sinister by it. but also he shows himself at times to be oddly traditional and oddly kind of conservative in certain ways. And so I'm wondering how much of Caligula's escapades are a result of him trying to sort of appeal to Tiberius. Do you know what I mean? And maybe that having a corrupting effect of its own on him. In the show, I'm not talking about the history. I'm talking about the show here. So just, what we see in the show. Maybe I'm missing a detail that's important, but
yeah. Yeah, I don't know. First of all, just technical thing here. Did your mic come out of unplugged again?
I don't believe so. Why is
okay.
there?
You sound okay. The quality of sound just changed, but I don't want to interrupt the whole show here.
Okay, all right.
It sounds okay. But yeah, getting back to the topic. Yeah, I'm really, really intrigued by your observation there about Caligula, though, because he I mean it kind of goes back to the dramatic conflict in Hamlet, where in Hamlet there's always the debate, how crazy is Hamlet and how much is Hamlet pretending to be crazy, or what parts are on what side of the line. And so obviously Caligula is a lot crazier than Hamlet, but he's definitely playing it up too.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's funny because there's obviously both. Like, he's obviously clearly meant to be insane, and we see it clearly. I think in the next episode when he gets his headaches, and there's something wrong with his brain for sure.
Yeah,
but it's ambiguous, like a lot of things in the show. It's funny because the show is so heavy-handed at times and so mustache twirling, yet it still allows for this degree of ambiguity. That I think is where sort of, I don't know, it's like, again, I've said this a lot, but I'm going to say it here now because it's important and it's coming up. But I think that this is one of the most sympathetic depictions of Caligula that you'll see, even though it's also one of the most over-the-top, sort of fun depictions of Caligula. And it's one of the best examples of a sympathetic villain that I've ever seen, where the villain still, and this is true of every one of the villains so far, the villains are still terrifying, but you do sympathize with them. And I think that's, we had a whole period in the 90s where it was just all sympathetic villains. And you sort of saw how difficult it is to retain the fear and the terror that you have of a villain when they're overly sympathetic. And I think,
yeah, well, there was a whole thing. It was kind of a truism people would state in the 90s that the villain's always the most interesting character, and and Hollywood bought into it too heavily.
Yeah,
to the point where it's like it just, the stories weren't working because they were leaning on it too hard.
Well, you still need to be afraid of the villain. Do you know what I mean? That's general. Like, you still need to be afraid of the villain. I'm still terrified of Caligula in this show. I would not want to have to have him pass judgment over me on any day of the week.
No, and all the characters need to be interesting. You can't go, let's make an interesting villain, and the hero's just gonna be there. He'll just be the bland hero. Because I was like, in this scene, I mean, not that Claudius is amazingly heroic, but he is our protagonist to an extent that anyone is in this story, and and it's like, he, as you say, he comes up to Caligula and he kind of removes his mask in this scene. It's like, hey, you're in danger. He takes off his fool act, and it's like, look, he's taking his mask off at that point. And so it's a fascinating scene because we've got two very fascinating and complicated characters talking to each other. But going back to your earlier point too about the ambiguity, it's like, I think ambiguity is so important in this kind of show, because if we could agree on all the characters, and if we understood all the characters completely, they would be a lot less human than they are. It's like, because people aren't that logical. I mean, not everything they do makes sense. Not everyone has a reason for everything they do that's clear. But this show, the characters feel consistent, but they don't. They're not. they're not entirely understandable at the same time either.
Well, and I think what that helps for is for replay value. Like when you watch a show, if the characters are, if it's all easily understood and everything lines up 100% and you get it, there's almost no point in watching again. Sometimes I see that with a lot of movies and a lot of shows, but with a show like this, every time I watch it, I have new questions. I sort of say, "Oh, I didn't notice that about this character. I wonder if this character." And sometimes they're questions that lead me in stupid directions, but it's still much more engaging to be able to go back to a series or a book and have that experience with it. I just find that with this one. This is like, for me, this show is definitely my benchmark of this is like how you do a good show. Like this is like a lot of shows try to do what this show is doing and do not succeed. And again, I think a lot of it does revolve around the fact that the characters they're very human. They're, like you said, Claudius, he's not just a hero. He's not just a fool. There's a lot going on, and also even when you're disappointed in Claudius, you understand. Like you get it. It would take balls of steel to do what like Antonia does. Do you know what I mean? Like you would not be. Most people would behave like Claudius, I think.
Exactly. He's disappointing by the standards of a protagonist in a TV series. He's not disappointing by the standards of just an average human being.
Yeah. But maybe he is, because maybe it's sort of like you're realizing sort of, that's the average human being. That's the. It's. I don't know. I think this is one of the better episodes in the show, number one, because I really like the maneuvering to get Sejanus out of power is very interesting on its own. But then you have all this interesting character stuff, and that scene at the end is so powerful. That scene where La Villa is in the room and the mother's on the outside, and also the little quip at the end with Claudius, where he talks about how he was permitted to divorce Aelia because of his connection to his mother, and his mother was the one who uncovered the plot, and that he was by tradition he was only supposed to give back 50% of the dowry or something, and he gave back all of it. And he comments that she must have thought me quite the fool.
Yeah, that's a good close to the episode there.
But yeah, I mean, I'm sure we've overlooked a lot, but I mean, again, you can usually tell how good an episode is by how easy it is for us to talk about it. And we've gone on for an hour already, and we're not even on steam. So
you're saying that this show, that the ambiguity makes things good for a rewatch. It makes it good for a discussion too, because there's so many times we interpreted things differently in this episode, and that's great. I love that.
Well, what it means is if you're sitting in this is the kind of show you should watch with people if you can. Because you'll have there are some movies you watch and you say nothing during or after. This is a show where you kind of don't say anything while it's happening, except maybe for laughter, which is you're sort of communicating your amusement over the course of the show or your other emotions, but you don't generally. I find it's difficult to interrupt the show when you're watching it. But after, you'll definitely have conversation to be had. It's that kind of a series.
And it's one that's good to watch throughout your life. The last time I watched the show, I was in my mid-20s. Now I'm in my late 40s, and it's a very different show to me now. I have a very different perspective on life, and I was a lot more idealistic when I watched this last time, and I was like, the Republic should come back and blah blah and blah, and and I'm a lot more I don't know, I have a lot more complex view on politics now.
Well, I think as you age, your take, because when I was in my 20s, I was probably in my 20s when I first saw this, and that was kind of my reaction too. You know what I mean? And but then each time I would watch it, I'd have a different reaction as I got older. And but I think what's cool about it is all of those the show plays to all of those very well. You can enjoy it at different stages of life. So
exactly. That's my point. I'm not saying I enjoy it more now. I enjoy it differently now. you know, whatever you bring to the show, you get different things from it.
And we didn't, we didn't get time to go into Apicarda, but I guess that's okay. It's just a minor character, anyways. But yeah, I think we covered pretty much everything. And yeah, so also I probably should have mentioned this at the start of the episode when we had everybody listening. But we have a book called House of Paper Shadows out. You can go and check it out on RPG Now. It's a wuxia-horror sort of dungeon crawl adventure. It's more than a dungeon crawl, but it is sort of like it's my version of a wuxia dungeon. I'm really, again, it's out on PDF and it'll be out in print in October in time for Halloween. I think I'm going to do like a special Halloween running of that module. I think I'm going to have to. So we'll be back next time with episode 8, which is Zeus by Jove. So we're now going to get into the Caligula episodes, which, as I've stated multiple times, these are the best episodes of the series. We've already kind of gotten into them because we've been dealing with Caligula, but these are the episodes where Caligula becomes emperor, and they're just amazing for a number of reasons. So we will get into that, and also I think we should. I don't know if we mentioned John Hurt plays Caligula. I don't know if we brought that up, but he's
yeah, I think in a previous episode, not in this episode though.
So anybody who watches Doctor Who will be aware of him from the War Doctor episodes, and anybody who's seen Alien knows him as the guy who got his guts eaten out by the alien bursting from his chest. And
he's also Hazel the rabbit in Watership Down. So there you go.
Yeah, he's in I think he was in The Elephant Man. There's another one.
Another big one. Yeah.
He's a great actor, and
he's fantastic.
I don't think you could have cast Caligula more perfectly.
No, you really couldn't.
So, all right. So we will let you go, and we will talk to you later.